They're arguing about you right now. Somewhere in a room you'll never enter. Your name is being dragged through conversations you'll never hear. And here's what separates you from everyone else who loses sleep over this. You already won. Not because you defended yourself. Not because you showed up with facts and reason. You won because you understood something. Most people spend their entire lives refusing to learn. The arguments that matter most are the ones you never attend. Machiavelli knew this. 500 years before social media turned every disagreement into performance art, he understood that visibility is a liability, that presence in conflict is weakness dressed as strength. While other men fought for their reputations in public squares, Machiavelli watched from windows. He studied the aftermath. The bodies left behind after men won their arguments but lost everything else. Because here's the truth, they don't teach you. Every argument you participate in is a confession that someone else's opinion matters more than your position, a confession that you need to be understood, a confession that approval is currency you're still willing to trade for. Let them argue. Let them build cases against ghosts. Let them rehearse speeches for audiences that will never materialize. While they're busy defending positions, you're busy building power. And power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need validation. It certainly doesn't show up to arguments. Think about the last time someone pulled you into a conflict. Not a discussion, not a debate, a conflict. Where the goal wasn't understanding, the goal was submission. They needed you to bend, to break, to admit something. And whether you won or lost that argument, here's what actually happened. You gave them your time, your energy, your attention, the three resources you can never get back. You traded irreplaceable parts of your life for the temporary satisfaction of being right, or the temporary sting of being wrong. Either way, you lost. Machiavelli would have looked at that exchange and seen something you probably missed. You were never in an argument. You were in an extraction. Someone mined you for reaction, for emotion, for proof that they could move you. And you gave it to them, free of charge. The people who truly run things, the ones who shape outcomes without fanfare, they understand scarcity, not scarcity of resources, scarcity of presence. They know that the moment you step into an argument, you've already negotiated down your value. You've signaled that this conflict is worth your finite attention, that their criticism holds weight, that their challenge merits response. And in that signal, you've told them exactly how to hurt you. Most people think silence is passive, that refusing to engage is the same as retreat. This is what keeps them trapped in an endless cycle of defensive positioning, always explaining, always justifying, always one comment away from needing to set the record straight. But silence isn't absence, it's presence without permission. It's the refusal to be pulled into someone else's narrative. When you don't show up to argue, something interesting happens. The people who wanted to confront you have to confront themselves. Their accusations hang in the air with no target. Their anger has nowhere to land. They're shadow boxing. And eventually they look foolish. Not because you made them look foolish, because they're arguing with someone who isn't there. This is the first principle of winning arguments you never participate in. Absence is authority. When you refuse to defend, you force others to attack nothing, and attacking nothing is exhausting. They'll tire themselves out building cases against silence, preparing evidence for a trial that never convenes. While they're doing that, you're doing what actually matters. You're building, creating, moving. But here's where most people fail. They understand the concept. They see the wisdom in disengagement. And then someone says something that cuts just deep enough. Suddenly, all that wisdom evaporates. Suddenly, they need to respond. Because here's the uncomfortable truth about arguments. We don't participate in them to change minds. We participate in them to manage our own anxiety. That burning feeling in your chest when someone attacks you, that compulsion to set things straight, that overwhelming need to be understood. None of that is about truth. It's about control. You want to control how others see you. You want to control the narrative. You want to control outcomes that were never yours to control in the first place. Machiavelli watched men destroy themselves over this. Princes who could have ruled for decades, cut down because they needed to win arguments with enemies who didn't matter. Leaders who traded kingdoms for the satisfaction of being right. Powerful men who forgot that power and proving yourself are opposing forces. The more you prove, the less you possess. Think about someone in your life right now who holds real influence. Not the loudest person in the room. Not the one who always has something to say. The one who actually shapes outcomes. How often do you see them in arguments? How often do you see them defending themselves? How often do you see them explaining their decisions to people who weren't part of making them? Almost never. Because they understand something fundamental. Justification is for those who need permission. Explanation is for those who need approval. Defense is for those who need validation. And none of those things are compatible with power. Now here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. This doesn't mean you never communicate. It doesn't mean you become some silent, brooding figure who refuses all dialogue. It means you choose your battles with surgical precision. And most battles aren't worth the blade. When someone comes at you with accusations, with challenges, with demands that you defend yourself, ask one question. What do I gain from engaging? Not what do I lose by staying silent? What do I gain by speaking? If the answer is their approval, their understanding, their validation, the answer is nothing. Those are temporary states that cost permanent resources. But if the answer is strategic advantage, actual protection of something valuable, or the prevention of genuine harm, then you act with precision, with economy, with no more words than absolutely necessary. You don't argue. You simply state, and then you leave. This is the second principle. When you must speak, speak once. No circular debates, no back and forth, no getting drawn into their framework. You deliver your position with the finality of stone, and then you return to silence. Because here's what happens in extended arguments. The person with the most patience wins. Not the person who's right, not the person with better facts. The person who's willing to endure the most repetition, the most rehashing, the most exhausting circular logic. Is that really how you want to spend your time? Winning wars of attrition over things that won't matter next month? Machiavelli understood that reputation isn't built in arguments. It's built in results. While men were busy defending their honor in public squares, others were quietly accumulating power, building alliances, creating dependencies, structuring systems where their value became undeniable. You know what's better than defending yourself against accusations of incompetence? Being so competent that the accusations sound insane. You know what's better than arguing you're trustworthy? Having a track record that makes distrust look foolish. You know what's better than convincing someone you're valuable? Being so valuable they can't function without you. This is how you win arguments without participating. You make the argument irrelevant. You build a reality where the accusations don't align with observable facts, not because you defended against them, because you made them incompatible with the world you created. Most people approach conflict backwards. Someone attacks them, and they think I need to defend. But defense is acceptance of the framework. It's agreement that this conflict matters, that this arena is worth entering, that this opponent has standing to challenge you. When you refuse the framework entirely, something shifts. You're no longer in their game. You're not even watching it. You're playing something else entirely. And that drives people absolutely insane, because the only thing worse than being argued with is being ignored. Argument implies equality, implies that both parties have something to prove. Ignore implies hierarchy, implies that this conflict is beneath notice. This is the third principle. Strategic indifference is a weapon. When you treat accusations with the same energy you treat weather reports, noting them, processing them, but never being moved by them, you communicate something profound. You communicate that their opinion of you is not a variable in your equation. Now let me be clear about something. This isn't about suppressing emotion. This isn't about pretending you don't care when you do. This is about understanding that your feelings are information, not instructions. That anger at being misunderstood is data, not a command to make yourself understood. That frustration with false accusations is feedback, not a mandate to correct the record. Feel everything, process everything, respond to almost nothing. Because response is what they're extracting. Your reaction is the product, and you're not in the business of giving that away. Machiavelli watched this play out in the courts of Renaissance Italy. Men would be provoked, deliberately, systematically, until they responded in ways that destroyed them. The provocation was never the weapon. The response was, your enemies don't need to defeat you. They just need you to defeat yourself. And the easiest way to make that happen is to pull you into arguments where victory is impossible, where the game is rigged, where the goal isn't truth, it's exhaustion. Think about online arguments. How many have you seen where someone changed their mind, where facts were presented and positions shifted? Almost none. Because that's not what those spaces are for. They're arenas for performance, for tribal signaling, for the public demonstration of loyalty to certain ideas. When you argue in those spaces, you're not trying to convince your opponent, you're trying to convince the audience. But here's the problem. The audience isn't watching to learn, they're watching for entertainment, for drama, for someone to lose. And whether you win or lose, you've given them exactly what they wanted. You've been the show, the spectacle, the entertainment. While actual power is being built by people who aren't performing, who aren't visible, who are creating infrastructure, while everyone else creates content. This is the fourth principle. Visibility in conflict is a liability. Every argument you participate in is information you're giving away. Your triggers, your values, your limits, your strategies. Smart opponents don't want to defeat you in argument. They want to map you, to understand where you're sensitive, where you'll expend energy, what makes you break your silence. Every time you engage, you hand them that map. But when you don't engage, they're operating blind. They throw accusations into the void and listen for echoes. When they hear nothing, they recalibrate. Throw something else. Listen again. Still nothing. Eventually, they're forced to do one of two things. Either give up because the sport isn't fun without participation, or escalate so dramatically that they expose themselves. Both outcomes favor you. Machiavelli wrote that the wise prince makes himself feared, not loved. But he left out the most important part. The wisest prince makes himself unknown. Because you can't attack what you can't map. You can't provoke what you can't predict. You can't manipulate what you can't model. Silence isn't just the absence of speech. It's the presence of mystery. And mystery is power. When people don't know how you'll respond, they hesitate. When they don't know what matters to you, they can't leverage it. When they don't know your limits, they can't find your edges. This is why the most dangerous people are often the quietest. Not because they're planning something sinister, because they've removed the handles others use to grab them. They've smoothed their surface, made themselves difficult to grip, difficult to move, difficult to extract from. Most people broadcast everything, their opinions, their values, their triggers, their goals, and then they wonder why they're constantly being pulled into conflicts, why they're always defending, always explaining, always exhausted. You've made yourself easy to play, like a piano with all the keys labeled. Anyone can walk up and make you produce sounds. Anger, defense, justification, pride. They just need to know which keys to press. When you remove those labels, something changes. People can press all they want, but they get unpredictable results or no results at all. And that unpredictability is protection. This is the fifth principle. Predictability is vulnerability. When people know how you'll respond to provocation, they control you. Not through force, through pattern recognition. They've learned your code, and they can run your program whenever they want. Breaking that pattern is simple. Not easy, but simple. Stop responding the way you've always responded. When someone expects defense, give them nothing. When they expect anger, give them calm. When they expect engagement, give them absence. Not as a tactic, as a standard, because tactics are temporary. Standards are who you are. Tactics are things you do when it suits you. Standards are things you maintain regardless of circumstance. And here's where it gets interesting. When you maintain this standard long enough, something shifts, not in them, in you. You stop needing to win arguments because you stop caring about the things arguments are about: approval, being understood, being right, winning the room. All of those things lose their pull, not because you've become cold, because you've become clear about what matters, clear about where your energy goes, clear about what's worth your finite time on this planet. And spoiler alert, it's not convincing people who've already decided about you. It's not defending yourself to audiences that don't pay your bills. It's not winning arguments that will be forgotten by next week. Machiavelli wrote for princes, for people who had kingdoms to run. And here's what he understood that most people miss. You have a kingdom too. It's called your life, your time, your energy, your attention, your peace of mind. These are territories you rule. And every argument you participate in is an invasion you permitted, an invasion you facilitated, an invasion where you opened the gates and invited the enemy in. And then you wonder why you feel conquered. Stop opening the gates. Stop granting access to your internal state. Stop treating every provocation like it's a summons you must answer. You're not on trial. You're not required to show up. You're not obligated to make yourself understood to people who've already decided misunderstanding is more convenient. This is the sixth principle. Your attention is your territory. Defend it more fiercely than you defend your reputation, because your reputation is what others think. Your attention is what you have. And reputation without attention is nothing. It's approval from people who won't be at your funeral. It's validation from audiences that will forget you the moment something shinier appears. It's winning arguments with people who don't affect your actual life. Meanwhile, your attention is the raw material of your existence. It's what you convert into results, into relationships that matter, into work that lasts, into experiences that shape you. Every minute you spend arguing with someone who doesn't matter is a minute you didn't spend building something that does. Every hour you spend defending yourself is an hour you didn't spend improving yourself. Every day you spend managing your reputation is a day you didn't spend expanding your capability. And here's the cruel math of it. The people criticizing you aren't spending their time this way. They're spending a few seconds throwing accusations, while you're spending hours, days, weeks managing the fallout. They're extracting maximum damage with minimum investment. You're suffering maximum impact with no return. This is asymmetric warfare. And you're losing because you keep showing up to a game designed for you to lose. Machiavelli would tell you to change the game, not by arguing better, by refusing to play. When someone attacks you publicly, expecting defense, and you simply continue building, continue creating, continue operating as if the attack didn't happen, You've done something more powerful than winning the argument. You've made the argument irrelevant. Because here's the thing about accusations that go unanswered. They have a shelf life. Without fresh engagement, they expire. The audience gets bored. The accuser looks like they're fixating. The whole thing fades into the background noise of the internet. But if you engage, you refresh it. You give it new life. You bring new audience members into an old conflict. You extend the shelf life of something that should have died quietly. This is the seventh principle. Engagement is resurrection. Every time you respond to old criticism, you bring it back from the dead. You reanimate conflicts that were decomposing. You ensure that more people see the accusation than ever would have if you just let it pass. Think about the people you respect most, the ones with real accomplishments, real impact, real legacy. How often do you see them in petty arguments? How often do you see them defending themselves against random criticism? How often do you see them explaining themselves to people who don't matter? Almost never. Not because they don't get criticized. Everyone gets criticized because they understand that response is a form of respect, and criticism from irrelevant sources doesn't merit respect. It merits acknowledgement, at most a mental note, a strategic data point, but not engagement, never engagement. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince, he wasn't writing for the masses. He was writing for people who understood that power requires ruthless prioritization, that you can't defend everything, that trying to win everyone over is the fastest path to losing yourself. He was writing for people who understood that the moment you care what everyone thinks, you become controllable by everyone, that universal approval is universal vulnerability, that trying to maintain a reputation among people who don't respect you is like trying to hold water in your hands. The more you squeeze, the more you lose. The harder you try, the less you have. The more you defend, the weaker you appear. This is the eighth principle. Defense implies guilt. When you rush to defend yourself, you signal that the accusation had merit, that it was worth addressing, that it hit close enough to something true that you needed to correct it. But when you don't defend, you signal something else entirely, that the accusation is so far from reality it doesn't warrant response, that the source lacks credibility, that this conflict is beneath your notice. And that signal, that calm, undisturbed signal, does more for your reputation than any defense ever could. Because people respect composure. They respect people who aren't rattled. They respect people who can be attacked and not flinch. Not because those people are emotionless, because they're secure. They know who they are. They know what they've built. They know their value doesn't decrease based on someone else's inability to see it. This is what Machiavelli understood about power. It's not loud. It's not defensive. It's not constantly proving itself. It just is, and everyone can feel it. The person who needs to tell you they're powerful isn't. The person who needs to defend their competence isn't competent. The person who needs to argue they're valuable isn't valuable enough. Because true power, true competence, true value, these things are self-evident. They don't need spokespeople. They don't need defense attorneys. They don't need PR campaigns. They need results. And results speak in a language that requires no translation. This is the final principle. Results are the only argument that matters. Everything else is noise. Everything else is performance. Everything else is people arguing about reality while others are busy creating it. So the next time someone pulls you into an argument, the next time you feel that burning need to defend yourself, the next time you want to set the record straight, ask yourself one question. Will winning this argument make me stronger, wealthier, wiser, or more capable? If the answer is no, you already know what to do. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Let them argue with the version of you they created in their mind. Let them build cases against ghosts. Let them exhaust themselves fighting shadows. While they're doing that, you'll be doing what actually matters. Building, creating, moving, living. Because that's how you win arguments you never participate in. Not by being right, by being irrelevant to the conversation entirely, by operating at a level where their criticism can't reach, by building a life so undeniable that their accusations sound absurd. Machiavelli would tell you this: your reputation is not your responsibility. Your results are. Focus on the latter. The former will take care of itself, and if it doesn't, if people still misunderstand you, still criticize you, still argue about you in rooms you'll never enter, let them. You're too busy winning to participate.